I meet my real estate agent out here on Coyote Pass because it's just come to the point where the family's not going to live here. Robyn, I think, was the last to give up on the dream, but she's finally consented. Yeah, let's go ahead and sell.
It all starts with a number that just doesn't fit. The kind of number you only notice if you're looking at the fine print, public records, closing dates, and who was actually holding the pen when the deal went down. On the show, Kody sold Coyote Pass as this big, equal family dream. 4 wives, 1 husband, wide open land where everyone's piece of the pie was supposedly the same size and just as sweet. But if you've seen the paper trail, and trust me, fans have been combing through it, it paints a very different picture. One where the person cashing in on the comfort now may not have been the one footing the bill then.
I've actually thought about asking if he wants to buy me out, but we got to pay it off, and he's not talking to me about it, so I think I'm going to have to lawyer up.
According to what's been dug up in county property records, something about the timeline doesn't just look off, it looks staged. We're talking about a closing date that allegedly doesn't line up with the big "we're too broke for this" speeches Kody gave on camera. In fact, fans claim the land purchase was already set in motion, maybe even finalized, while the show was still playing out financial panic for dramatic effect. It's the kind of gap that makes you ask, was the crisis real or was it reality TV real? And here's where it gets juicier, because when you start to line up who owned what parcel and when, suddenly the story shifts. On paper, certain plots seem to gravitate toward Kody and Robyn's control, even when other households were allegedly pitching in from shared funds.
Mary and I don't know what's going on, so of course we're frustrated. We're completely in the dark. There's no communication, nothing.
Now, the show never gave us that kind of detail, because why ruin the fairy tale when you can just sell the dream? But if the receipts floating around fan forums are legit, and we're not saying they're all confirmed yet, it sure looks like some people paid into a pot that poured more into one side of the family than the others. That's why we're going to label everything we cover. Confirmed means it's in the public record, likely means there's enough evidence to lean that way. Unverified is exactly that, a rumor until proven otherwise. And disputed means someone's come forward with a counter-narrative worth noting. We're not here to pretend the internet never makes things up, but we're also not here to ignore the receipts you've been posting, screenshotting, and whispering about for years. The stakes couldn't be bigger. This isn't just about who chipped in on a dusty plot of Arizona land. It's about who has the legal right to build, sell, or shut everyone else out if they want to.
I came because we have this property. I'm going to suggest to you that you protect your interests in it as far as what you're entitled to, a quarter of it.
If you control the title, you control the dream. And if you don't, you're just renting hope from someone else's signature. That's the unspoken truth under all the family unity talk, and it's exactly why fans have been asking, who really paid for Coyote Pass? And just when you think the answer is obvious, when you're ready to point your finger at one household, wait until you see what happened next. Because in the land of sister wives, the person holding the deed isn't always the one who wrote the check. On TV, Coyote Pass was sold to us like a love letter from Kody to his whole family. He stood out there in that dusty Arizona wind, pointing toward the horizon like a pioneer, talking about how this land was going to unite everyone under one dream. 4 wives, multiple houses, shared property lines. It was going to be their forever home, the foundation of a brand new chapter.
Yeah, so Janelle was kind of telling me at that point that she was going to be getting a lawyer. I'm like, we don't need to do that. Cody's not going to do that to us. He's not going to make... Sorry, just made myself dizzy.
At least that's the fairy tale TLC let us watch unfold. But here's where things start to wobble. That on-screen storyline where Kody is this master planner, slowly building toward a shared future, just doesn't match what the documents suggest. Public deeds, mortgage filings, and parcel transfers, yes, the ones fans have been passing around like hot gossip, hint at a reality where certain names ended up with more control than others. And here's the kicker. Those filings don't show a perfect equal split. They show a pattern. And that pattern, if you believe the timelines, leans suspiciously toward Kody and Robyn. Let's talk about the money narrative. On air, we were spoon-fed scenes of financial struggle, Kody wringing his hands, wives stressing over budgets, even entire episodes built around, "we can't do this yet." But while we were watching staged tension over pennies, fans alleged that in the background, parcels were already being secured. If that's true, and again, this is where we keep it in the likely lane until all the receipts line up, it means those dramatic money talks weren't exactly about whether they could buy Coyote Pass. They were about how to frame it for the cameras. And that's where the trust between cast and audience starts to fray. Because if you're Christine or Janelle, and you're going along with this shared vision, you'd assume the financial sacrifices are being made evenly, right? But according to the property records we've seen fans dissect, some parcels went straight into the names of people who already had the advantage of a brand new house and stable living situation. Cough, Robyn, cough. While others were still waiting for their dream home to materialize on bare dirt. To be clear, public property documents can't tell us who exactly wrote which check, but they can tell us whose names are on the deeds, when they were added, and in what proportions. And when those names line up with who's been living the most comfortably post-Vegas, it's hard not to see the through line. This is the point where a lot of fans started shifting from, wow, this family is struggling, to hold on, are we watching a PR version of the truth? Because if the paper reality is this far from the TV story, what else has been massaged for our viewing pleasure? And the first big clue to that gap comes when you stop looking at the family as one unit and start looking at their moves in sequence, which is exactly where we're going next, because once you see the timeline, the whole picture starts to rearrange itself in ways that can't be unseen. If you really want to understand Coyote Pass, you have to stop looking at it as one single transaction and start looking at it as a sequence of moves: Vegas sales, Flagstaff purchases, and those all-important parcel closings. Because when you lay it all out in order, something jumps out so loud you can almost hear it over the Arizona wind. It starts back in Vegas when the Sister Wives cul-de-sac was put on the chopping block. Each wife's home was listed, sold, and cleared out in what was pitched to viewers as a bittersweet goodbye. Kody was framing it as the necessary sacrifice for the next chapter. On camera, it played like the family was pooling all their resources to make this new dream happen. But according to fans who've gone deep into the property records, the timing is peculiar. Some Vegas sales wrapped up, the checks cleared, and then in what looks to be lightning speed, money was allegedly being funneled toward Coyote Pass parcels. And here's where the drama spikes. The show made it seem like they were still deciding on Coyote Pass when those sales happened. We saw Kody and the wives in heated debates, weighing options, even walking the land like it was just one of many possibilities. But if you compare the air dates to the recorded closing dates, the land deal was already moving. In some cases, it appears the purchase was finalized, while the show was still milking the will they or won't they tension. Then comes the Flagstaff curveball. While some family members were allegedly living in rentals and still dreaming about breaking ground, Kody and Robyn's household secured that large, fully furnished home, the one that became a flashpoint for fans. The optics, immaculate comfort for one branch of the family tree, while the others were left juggling housing uncertainty. The timeline suggests these moves weren't sequential in the way the show implied, they overlapped. And overlapping means priorities had to be set. The most eyebrow-raising part? Certain parcels of Coyote Pass were recorded in names that, according to public records, matched the people already in the most stable housing situation. Meanwhile, Christine and Janelle's paths to actual homeownership in Flagstaff were bumpier, full of delays and compromises. This isn't just nitpicking dates, it's about motive. If the land was secured earlier than portrayed, why keep the decision-making storyline alive? Was it to keep tension brewing for ratings? Or was it to disguise who actually had skin in the game when the ink hit the paper? We can't claim to know for sure, but the sequence certainly benefits the narrative. Kody wanted the audience to believe that he was this tireless negotiator, pulling the family forward. But in reality, the dates make it look like the train had already left the station, with some people riding first class and others still running for the platform. And that leads us to the next big question. If the timeline already tells us when the moves were made, what happens when we follow the money? Because the dollars don't just line up, they point. And they point somewhere very specific. If the timeline shows us when things happened, the money shows us how. And in this case, how might be the most telling part of all. On the show, Kody talks like the family's finances are one big communal pool. He loves that word we. We bought this, we paid that. We are sacrificing together, but the receipts fans have pulled suggest the we wasn't so equal when it came time to put cash down on Coyote Pass. Let's start with the most obvious funding stream, the Vegas house sales. Each wife walked away from those cul-de-sac homes with a payout. On paper, that money should have been the starter fuel for each household's share of the new land. But according to fans who've compared the timing of those sales with mortgage filings, some of those proceeds may have been redirected, possibly to cover immediate housing needs, like Robyn's famously pricey Flagstaff home, before touching the land at all. Then there's the TLC salary. We can't see the exact contracts, but it's widely believed the family gets paid per episode, with Kody controlling distribution. If that's the case, then the question becomes, did everyone's cut go straight toward Coyote Pass, or did certain households get to use their TLC income for other priorities while still ending up with full claim to a parcel? That's where the fan frustration hits a boiling point, because if communal funds covered land for people who didn't sacrifice equally, that's less big love and more big loophole. Now add in side hustles, cameo videos, book sales, LuLaRoe commissions, speaking events. Each wife had different levels of outside income. Christine was hustling on the side, Janelle had her wellness business, but Robyn, her income streams were less obvious. And yet somehow her household landed in the most secure living situation while also sitting on a solid slice of Coyote Pass. fans can't help but connect the dots. If she wasn't visibly earning as much outside the show, then where did her share of the land money come from? The other wildcard is debt. Public filings show that some parcels of Coyote Pass had liens and mortgages attached. That's normal, but it's also telling. Debt means payments, interest, and long-term obligations. So who's on the hook for those payments? Is it proportionate to ownership, or is the paper structured so that certain names hold the asset while others shoulder the load? Without direct access to their full agreements, we can't say for certain, but the ownership records and debt filings line up in ways that give Kody and Robyn the kind of leverage you can't measure in dollars alone. And that's the point. This was never just about buying dirt. It was about buying control. Land isn't just a place to live, it's power. If the funding streams were uneven from the start, then the dream of Coyote Pass was built on an imbalance baked right into the foundation. And the next layer of this cake? It gets personal. Because once you factor in Robyn's home, decor, and spending priorities, it starts looking less like a shared dream and more like a private empire dressed up as a family plan. When Sister Wives viewers talk about Coyote Pass, one phrase keeps popping up in the same breath: Robyn's house. And not just any house. We're talking about a sprawling, fully furnished Flagstaff property with a price tag that made jaws drop, secured while the rest of the family was still juggling rentals and clinging to the promise of one day on the land. The optics were brutal. On the show, Kody wrung his hands about finances, lamenting that building on Coyote Pass would have to wait because money was just too tight. Yet, right in the middle of that storyline, Robyn's household moved into a home that looked like it had been plucked from a real estate magazine, large, landscaped, and move-in ready. Fans immediately started doing the math. If money was that tight, how did this purchase make the cut ahead of breaking ground for the other wives? According to speculation on Reddit and fan forums, this wasn't just about comfort, it was about prioritization. The theory goes like this: by locking Robyn into a permanent home first, Kody ensured his legal wife had stability while the others remained in transitional limbo. That stability, some fans argue, doubled as leverage. When your household is the only one with a permanent roof over its head, you hold more sway in family decision-making. And if that home purchase pulled funds, directly or indirectly, from the communal pot earmarked for Coyote Pass, that's where the resentment kicks in. Then there's the decor factor. Allegedly, Robyn's home underwent a wave of high-end decorating and furnishing while the rest of the family's land sat untouched. We're talking custom furniture, statement pieces, and the infamous doll room that still sparks debates to this day. None of that comes cheap. So naturally, fans have wondered, were those expenses made possible, at least in part, because the cost of Robyn's Coyote Pass share was being covered elsewhere? Kody's public defense, of course, is that Robyn's house was a strategic move, that it gave them a secure home base while they worked toward the bigger dream. But that explanation has never fully landed with viewers. To them, it looked like a clear case of taking care of one household first and telling the others to wait their turn. And in a family that was supposedly operating on equality, wait your turn sounds a lot like you're not the priority. It's that unevenness, the visible comfort gap, that made fans start questioning the entire Coyote Pass plan. Because if Robyn's house was paid for or supported in a way that took resources from the land fund, then the dream was compromised before it even started. And once you accept that possibility, it's not a far leap to start wondering how the actual ownership of Coyote Pass was structured. After all, land titles don't lie, and the names on those deeds may tell a story Kody would rather keep behind the scenes. If money is the fuel for Coyote Pass, the titles are the steering wheel, and when you look at who's holding that wheel, the ride starts looking a whole lot less equal than the show wanted us to believe. Because while Kody's mouth says family, the paper says something very different. In real estate, it's simple. The names on the deed are the ones with the legal claim. You can talk all day about verbal promises, handshake deals, and what's ours. But at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is what's recorded at the county office. And those county records, yes, the ones fans have pulled and cross-referenced, allegedly show that certain parcels were locked down under names that point straight to Kody and Robyn's corner. This is where the legal wife advantage becomes impossible to ignore. Because Robyn is the only wife still married to Kody in the eyes of the law, her name tied to parcels gives their household a different kind of permanence. Even if other wives helped fund the purchase, their leverage is limited if their names aren't on the paper. Without that paper, you can be left with nothing but memories and a verbal "I'll make it right" that can vanish the moment you walk away. Fans allege that some parcels are held jointly by Kody and an individual wife, while others lean heavily in his favor alone or in combination with Robyn. And here's the sting: those patterns, if accurate, could mean that in a worst-case family fallout, Kody and Robyn are positioned to keep the lion's share of the land, while the others get squeezed out or forced into buyouts. And buyouts cost money, the very money the others may have already sunk into acquiring the land in the first place. There's also the matter of liens and mortgages. If a parcel is jointly owned with Kody but the financing is tied to the other wife's name, who's technically carrying the risk? The setup could allow Kody to maintain control without carrying the same debt load, another subtle but powerful form of leverage. And leverage is everything when you're dealing with assets that can appreciate, be subdivided, or sold off down the line. When you combine the legal wife advantage, selective parcel titling, and strategic debt placement, the picture that emerges is not of a shared dream but of a chessboard, one where Kody and Robyn are playing the long game while the others are just trying to stay in the match. And once Christine left, that chessboard got even clearer. She walked away without a claim on the land she'd invested in emotionally, and according to some fan theories, financially. Which begs the question, was the imbalance always the plan, or did it just become convenient? And that leads us straight into the next chapter, because if Christine's exit was the first big stress test for Coyote Pass, Janelle's ongoing frustration is the second. And when you look at what these women put in compared to what they got out, the scales start to tip so far they practically fall over. If Coyote Pass was supposed to be a shared dream, then Janelle and Christine were the ones who treated it like a sacred mission. These two didn't just talk about building, they believed in it, fought for it, and if fan theories hold any truth, put serious skin in the game. Yet, when you look at where they ended up, it's hard not to see their efforts as the emotional down payment for someone else's future. Janelle was the blueprint believer. She had her vision boards, her floor plans, and a laser focus on getting on the land. On the show, she repeatedly said she was willing to make sacrifices to see it happen, sacrifices like living in a cramped rental, and later her infamous RV stint. Fans respected the hustle. But when you strip away the romanticized rugged independence edit TLC gave her, that RV represented something much harsher. She was making do without a permanent home, so money could allegedly be directed toward the land. And yet, all these years later, she still doesn't have a house there. Christine's story is even more bittersweet. She bought into the Coyote Pass dream right up until the moment she realized her marriage, and by extension, her stake in the future was over. She left Kody, and with that, she walked away from the land. If fan speculation is right, she may have walked away without ever seeing a true return on whatever funds or equity she contributed. Her departure became the clearest example of what not being on the title really means. No matter what you've put in, if your name's not there, you can leave with nothing but memories. Then there's the sweat equity factor. While Robyn's household was allegedly focused on settling into a finished home, Janelle and Christine were more hands-on, meeting with surveyors, pushing construction plans, budgeting for utilities, and essentially doing the groundwork to make Coyote Pass livable. This kind of work doesn't show up in financial filings, but it matters. It saves money. It accelerates timelines, and it adds value. And yet there's no equity line for effort in a legal document. Fans have pointed out that the imbalance here isn't just about money, it's about respect. When Christine left, Kody seemed more concerned with the property logistics than with acknowledging her years of buy-in. With Janelle, his tone has shifted from collaborative to critical, as though her inability to magically produce a house on Coyote Pass is a personal failing rather than a symptom of systemic family decisions. The emotional gut punch, these women's belief in Coyote Pass gave the project legitimacy, both within the family and to viewers. Their dedication made it seem real, inevitable. And yet, if the receipts fans have pieced together are anywhere close to accurate, the ones who believed hardest may have been positioned to gain the least. And that's where it starts to feel like this was never just about land. It was about the story being told, and how that story was shaped, maybe even edited, to keep certain truths from surfacing. Which brings us to the next layer. How much of this was the reality, and how much was reality TV? Reality TV sells emotion first and truth second, and nowhere is that clearer than in how Sister Wives presented Coyote Pass. On paper, it should have been a property development story, parcel acquisitions, funding challenges, titling decisions. But on screen, it became a soap opera about hurt feelings, misunderstandings, and working through it as a family, which is fine for drama, but not so fine if you actually care about who paid for what. The structure of the show often reorders events to build suspense. Scenes are filmed out of sequence, pickup shots are added months later, and conversations are spliced together to make them seem more immediate. That's just how the industry works. But when you apply that to a storyline involving large financial transactions, it can distort reality in ways that benefit certain narratives. Take, for example, the drawn-out will they or won't they debates about buying the land. If fans are correct about the closing dates, those debates were airing after the deals had already been signed. Then there's selective framing. How many times did we see a close-up on Kody's stress over money? Wrinkled brow, pacing around, talking about how they can't afford to build without ever cutting to a clear explanation of who actually owned which part of Coyote Pass. The omission isn't accidental. Legal documents don't make for glamorous TV, but they do make for accountability. And accountability doesn't always serve the person in the center of the family's power structure. Fans have long speculated that production leaned into emotional beats that distracted from the land's paper reality. The Robyn's house purchase, for example, got airtime, but it was framed as an emotional necessity, protecting the kids, finding stability, not as a financial decision that could potentially delay building on the land. Meanwhile, Janelle's RV storyline was spun as her adventurous choice, glossing over the possibility that it was also a byproduct of skewed resource allocation. Now, in fairness, editors have a job to make the show entertaining. And from their perspective, arguments, reconciliations, and emotional monologues are more gripping than a dry breakdown of mortgage filings. But the result is a version of events that's more about character arcs than concrete realities. It's a subtle sleight of hand. By the time you're caught up in Christine's frustration or Mary's loneliness, you're no longer asking, wait, who's on the deed to Lot 3? That's why the fan-led investigations matter so much. They fill in the gaps the show leaves open, cross-referencing public records with episode timelines to piece together the untelevised truth. And while some of those fan theories remain unverified, the sheer volume of discrepancies between the on-air story and the documented reality is enough to keep suspicion alive. If editing smoothed over the money story, then the receipts bring those jagged edges right back into focus. And once you start looking at those edges, it's impossible not to see what they're pointing toward: the people who have the most to gain if Coyote Pass is ever developed. Which leads to the big question: what happens if the fans are right about the imbalance? The answer could reshape not just the land plan, but the family's entire future. If the receipts and timelines fans have pieced together are even halfway accurate, then the real story of Coyote Pass isn't about delayed construction, it's about future control. Land is one of the most enduring assets you can own. It doesn't depreciate like cars or furniture. It appreciates. It gains strategic value, and it can be leveraged in ways that go far beyond building a dream home. Which is why, if Kody and Robyn's household holds the most secure legal claim, they're not just holding dirt, they're holding long-term power. Here's how it could play out. If the imbalance is real, the households with less or no title claim might find themselves essentially renting access to the land in the future. That could mean paying for a share of property taxes without ever gaining full ownership rights, or worse, being forced into a buyout if the relationship dynamics shift again. And in a family where relationships always shift, that's not a small risk. The buyout scenario is especially ugly. In theory, a spouse or ex-spouse could negotiate to purchase the other's share at market value. But market value years from now could be much higher than what anyone originally paid in, meaning someone could end up paying twice to claim what they thought they already owned. Fans have pointed out that this would especially disadvantage Janelle, who's been vocal about wanting her home there, but hasn't seemed to secure the same paper protection as Robyn. There's also the legal wildcard of liens and debts tied to certain parcels. If a parcel is mortgaged and the household attached to it can't keep up with payments, it could be sold or foreclosed, changing the entire layout of Coyote Pass and potentially opening the door for Kody and Robyn to consolidate even more land under their names. This isn't just speculation. It's a scenario any property owner with debt can face, but when the power structure of the family is already uneven, the consequences hit harder. On top of that, we have the emotional and PR stakes. If fans continue to uncover and share redacted receipts, the Sister Wives brand could take a reputational hit. And while controversy can boost short-term ratings, it can also lock in long-term narratives, ones that cast Kody and Robyn as the self-serving operators, rather than the visionaries they like to present themselves as. That kind of image problem can bleed into everything from future book deals to TLC renegotiations. The next big tell will be the paper trail itself. Watch for parcel transfers, refinancing filings, new liens, or sudden construction. Those are all public records that can be tracked without violating anyone's privacy, and they often reveal the real story before the cameras ever do. If we see moves that consolidate land into fewer names or secure Robyn's household further, that'll be the clearest confirmation yet of what fans have suspected. Because at the end of the day, if the imbalance is exactly what it looks like, then Coyote Pass was never about a shared future. It was about setting the board so that no matter what happens to the family, certain players always win. And that's a truth you can't edit out. In the end, Coyote Pass was never just about buying land, it was about buying position. Kody painted it as the crown jewel of his polygamous dream, the physical proof that all his wives could live side by side, united under his leadership. But the receipts tell a different story, one where the path to that crown jewel was paved unevenly, with certain households carrying more weight while others reaped more benefit. The deeper you dig, the harder it is to ignore the through line. From the Vegas sales to the Flagstaff moves, from the on-air we can't afford it speeches to the off-air property filings, the same names keep surfacing in the places that matter most. The deeds, the stable homes, the positions of long-term control. And more often than not, those names are Kody and Robyn. For viewers who've invested over a decade in this family's story, that's not just disappointing, it's infuriating. Because if you strip away the edits, the heartwarming monologues, and the "we're all in this together" soundbites, what's left looks a lot less like unity and a lot more like consolidation. The dream was marketed as a family legacy, but the paper trail, if fan-sourced records and timelines hold water, suggests it's a legacy with gatekeepers, not partners, and that's where the emotional sting really lands. Christine walked away, leaving behind not just a marriage, but a claim to land she once believed would be hers. Janelle's still circling the dream, trying to stake her place on soil she's long since helped pay for in one way or another. Meanwhile, Robyn enjoys a permanent home and a secure position on the land's chessboard, all under the shield of legal marriage to Kody. For anyone who's ever been part of a shared project that didn't feel so shared, it's a familiar and bitter pattern. So who really paid for Coyote Pass? That depends on which ledger you're looking at. The financial one, where the money came from all corners of the family, often unequally, or the legal one, where ownership and control are locked down in ways that seem to favor one household above all others. Both tell the truth, but only one will decide who gets to call Coyote Pass home in the end. If the receipts you've seen floating around Reddit, fan forums, and public record searches are right, then the answer isn't just who paid, it's who planned for this from the start. And that might be the most unsettling truth of all, that the dream wasn't built for everyone to win, but for certain players to never lose. So I'll leave you with this. If you had poured time, money, and hope into Coyote Pass, and the scales tipped exactly the way these receipts suggest, who should have the final say on what happens to it now? And in your definition of fairness, what would that look like? Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next video on your screen is waiting. And trust me, you won't believe what's coming next.